Good evening. My name is Arlene Silvera, and I will be the moderator for the School Board Forum. Welcome to the Madison School Board Forum for candidates who are running to be elected to the Madison School Board. The election is going to be held on April 5th. The forum is co-sponsored by the Eastside Progressives Neighborhood Action Team and GRUMPS, Grandparents United for Madison Public Schools. The candidates will have an opportunity to introduce themselves, but briefly, there are 3 school board seats on the ballot in April. Shepard Joyner, if you could wave when I say your name, and Laura Simkin are running for seat 3, currently held by Chris Carusi. Chris is not running for re-election. Ali Muldrow and David Blaska are running for seat 4. Ali is currently on the board and is running for re-election, and David Blaska is running as a write-in candidate. Nichelle Nichols is running unopposed for seat 5. Seat 5 is currently held by Ananda Murilli, who is not running for re-election. We thank both Chris and Ananda for their service to the school district. The candidates will each have time for a 1-minute introduction. I will then direct questions to each candidate, and I will shuffle the order in which the candidates respond to questions. I will state the time limit for response prior to asking the question. Arden Rice, you can wave, Arden, will be our timer. She will alert the candidates when there are 20 seconds left and when time is out. I will then ask the candidates to wrap it up. The chat function is going to be closed to viewers for the forum. We will post contact information for each of the candidates that they have provided. So if you have additional questions, we ask you to contact the candidates directly. The link to the video of the forum in the YouTube channel will be posted on the Eastside Progressives Facebook page by tomorrow. So that's the information. Now on with the show. We are going to start with a 1-minute introduction for each candidate, including why they are running and what skills they will bring to the office. And we will start with Laura, followed by Shepard.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor to speak with the Eastside Progressives and the GRUMPS. I'm Laura Simkin, and I'm running for school board because of the challenges our district is facing. Challenges that include staffing shortages, school safety issues, the achievement gap, and navigating the pandemic. These challenges are deeply impacting family, staff, and our students. I bring 2 important perspectives to the board. I'm a parent at MMSD, and I'm also an early childhood educator. I've been working in early childhood education for over 30 years. I've worked as an early childhood teacher and administrator in policy and curriculum development and in a wide variety of early care and education settings. I understand how policy decisions made at a board level impact the classroom. I believe deeply in the power of quality public education, and I know that together we can make our schools stronger.
Shepard, followed by Ali.
Thank you all so much for having me. My name is Shepard Joyner, and I'm running for school board. I was initially inspired to run for school board after listening to members of my community, feeling very ignited by someone who was running. And beyond that, I felt deeply supported by my community and also felt qualified by my previous experience and my current experience working at the University of Wisconsin women's soccer program, which works very closely with the UW-Madison School of Education Curriculum and Instruction Division. Beyond that, I have worked a lot in community organizing and community facilitation. And I have heard from members of my community that facilitation, communication, and collaboration are some of the biggest values that they feel I am qualified to support and represent on the board.
Ali, followed by David.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much, GRUMPS, for putting on this evening's forum. My name is Ali Muldrow. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am the co-executive director of the Gay Straight Alliance for Safe Schools, and right now I'm serving as the Madison School District's Board of Education president. I have loved this community my entire life. I was born here, raised here. I'm an alumni of our school. I have 2 children in Madison schools right now. My oldest goes to O'Keefe Middle School, and my middle kiddo goes to Lowell Elementary School. And when my youngest, who is just a little over 7 months old, is old enough to go to school, she'll go to school here too. I've been working in this district my entire adult life. I've worked in education since I was 19 years old. And I love our community, and I know that we have the ability to expand opportunities within education through the arts. We have the ability to empower our staff, and we have the ability to navigate resources well.
Thank you. Hey, David, followed by Nichelle.
Hello, I'm David Blaska, and I ran 3 years ago under the slogan of safer schools equals a safer community. This is not a grudge match. I'm a write-in only because I was hoping someone else would run, but I thought that the voters of Madison should have a real choice. I don't think anyone can say that our schools are safer today or that our community is safer. Every week, it seems like we read about kids 13, 14, 15 years old stealing cars and crashing them on the streets of Madison, sometimes during school hours. And this is simply an outgrowth of, I think, the disorder that we're seeing in our classrooms. 2 years ago, school police resource officers were removed from the schools. And that was just really the last straw, because 5 years earlier, the school district got rid of the disciplinary program and adopted what they called a major shift. We took a step into uncharted territories, a quote, with a behavior education plan. So that's why I'm running.
Thank you. Nichelle?
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. I'm Nichelle Nichols, running for school board. First of all, because I deeply am committed to this community and our public school system. I'm running to ensure that our Madison schools and our district exceed expectations for all students. And we are at a critical phase in our district. We are currently facing staff burnout, teacher and other staff shortages. We have seen enrollment decline. We have a newer administration that is establishing a strategic direction, and we have the lasting impact of COVID-19, which has elevated more needs for us to meet. So I want to make sure our public schools remain the strongest and best option for all of our students and families. And I believe what I bring to the table is an inside out view to the school board seat. I have been a former parent of the district with 4 sons who have graduated. I have worked in the district for 6 years as an administrator. And previously, I was also part of a community-based organization and can bring that lens to the seat. Thank you.
Thank you all. So the next question will be also 1 minute for a response. Which schools have you visited in the previous 4 years? And what are your sources of information about what is actually happening in the schools? And we'll start with Nichelle, followed by Shepherd.
All right, so I worked at MMSD up until the end of June of 2021. So in the 4 previous years, I visited many schools, mostly because my role was to focus on helping to lead professional learning for our staff out in schools around family engagement and equity. And I guess I would say the one conversation I've had most recently since leaving the district has been with an administrator at one of our schools who I think is feeling pretty discouraged about current state. I think there are a lot of folks who I still have stayed in touch with who are just feeling like they're trying to survive every day. So I can't name a specific school right now, but there's just a number of folks that I've been staying in contact with.
Thank you. Shepherd, followed by Laura.
So through my work with Open Soccer, I've primarily been visiting elementary schools. So I've been in Lincoln, Sandburg, Emerson, and a handful of others that, of course, I'm forgetting off the top of my head. And beyond that, I have been over the years also in contact with many different school staff in other elementary, middle, and high schools. I've also visited East High School on a number of occasions, primarily to support like extracurricular activities like the pottery fairs, in the before times. as well as being in contact through my activism work, especially as a disability activist, being in contact with a lot of family members and families of students who may have special needs in the school district.
Laura, followed by David.
Thank you. I have primarily been in the last 4 years in East High School and O'Keefe, which is where my son's at East now, and he went to O'Keefe. In the past, I've been to quite a few schools and I visit a lot of them, but that's as a parent whose kid is in sports. So I don't think that counts. As far as where I'm getting my information from around what's going on in the schools, it's from parents and from students, as well as connections I make with teachers. Those kinds of conversations. Along with that, the race to equity reporting that's been done and has been updated over the years, I've been getting some information from that as well. And that's been through lectures that have happened in a variety of the schools.
Hey, David, followed by Ali.
Well, I've been to East High School, the Follett, Memorial, Wright Middle School, the one on Badger, off of Badger Road, I can't remember the name of that one. Orchard Ridge, Toki is in my neighborhood. But my primary source, to be honest about it, is parents and teachers who are frustrated with the direction that the schools are taking. We're just not teaching discipline. And you can't learn without discipline. Teachers can teach, but they can't learn the students. And that requires the greatest skill of all is discipline. And mathematics, reading, language, they're all disciplines. Sports are disciplines, and they even have penalties if you break the rules of sports. And also attending school board meetings. Dylan Brogan of Isthmus has been a wonder. And also I think that Chris Ricker's doing a good job at the State Journal. So I certainly attended many school board meetings, and I've seen a few since we've gone COVID on the web.
Thank you. Ali?
Arlene, thank you so much for this question. Over the course of my first term, I've gotten to visit close to 40 of our schools. We have 32 elementary schools. I've visited all 12 of our middle schools. I've visited multiple sites where our students are, including our metro school, so the school that we have at the Juvenile Detention Center. I've been at all 4 of our comprehensive high schools, but I've also worked at all of our comprehensive high schools. I've also worked at Shabazz. I currently work with students at the University of Wisconsin every Monday, where I teach a course called Foundations of Leadership. I am in direct contact with our students and our schools on a regular basis because I am the board president. I've spent a significant amount of time at East this year. I've spent a significant amount of time looking at the facilities in order to talk about our referendums. And I have to say right now, thank you to our community for continuing to invest in our schools. We just had a meeting about our facilities, and it is important for school board members to understand the actual infrastructure that is our district.
Thank you all. So the next question is multi-parts. We'll ask one part at a time, but the topic is COVID and learning loss. So the first question is, scientists confirm that the pandemic has greatly impacted students, both socially and emotionally. Recently, a couple of 11-year-old MMSD students expressed their anxiety over being in school to a teacher telling her, "We don't know how to be in school anymore." So the first question, you'll have 2 minutes to answer. What is your plan to help MMSD children with their adjustment and reentry issues? And we'll start with Ali, followed by David.
Thank you so much for this question. In my work with the Gay Straight Alliance for Safe Schools and GSAFE, we have dealt with mental health crises as it impacts our LGBTQ youth and their families. For the last 25 years, I've been lucky enough to work with the Gay Straight Alliance for Safe Schools for the last 8 years. And so understanding the impact that isolation has, that anxiety and depression have on our young people, is really vital to what I do in my day job, and bringing that experience to emphasize the mental health needs of our students, to emphasize the mental health needs of our educators, and to emphasize the mental health needs of our families is one of the reasons why I think it's really important to have my lens at the table. I think alleviating stress right now and really creating a new standard for our learners and reimagining how young people get to interact socially and also how young people have outlets to express themselves is part of the reason I'm really passionate about making the arts part of core curriculum. So as a little kid, your creative thinking is your critical thinking. And as we continue to see young people have, heightened rates of suicidal ideation, as we continue to see young people have a greater risk of engaging in self-harm, we're not going to be able to punish our way out of a mental health crisis. We're going to have to bring experts to the table, and we're going to have to prioritize things that allow for our students to experience compassion in the classroom and allow for our young people to be successful at expressing their emotions, and really allow for us as a community to invest in one another in ways that embrace best practices. I think, restorative justice has been a conversation we're having as a board and as in a district in terms of how we invest in building communities in our schools, but also things like mindfulness and play-based learning and outdoor resources. So there's a lot to talk about in terms of that question. Thank you so much.
Thank you. David, followed by Nichelle.
Well, I'm also concerned about catching up. I think that the science has shown that our students in the roughly the year off that they had, I doubt that many of them were participating online in online education, and even at that, it's not equal to being in person. So I'm worried about the catch up, and I think that at some point the school board has to develop a policy how we're going to catch these kids up. But I think also kids have to feel safe in their schools, and if they don't feel safe, if they're subject to bullying, I've looked at the 111-page safety plan that the school has. 111 pages is too many pages, and then there's a flow chart. And the first part is call the central office if there's a problem. Instead of calling the parents, instead of calling 911 or the police, kids have to feel safe. That's the key thing. If they've been at home for a year and now they're in the mix, they have to feel that they're safe, and they cannot learn until they feel that they're safe. And too many of our kids, frankly, are not safe in our schools.
Nichelle, followed by Laura.
Thank you. So one of the things that I feel like is important for a board member is to be attuned enough to what students and parents and our staff are telling us are happening in their day-to-day. And so when I think about reentry from a board perspective, for me, I want to be listening for when we are talking about the school day, how many opportunities are students actually having for positive behavior supports and reinforcements and programming, as well as social emotional learning built into the core day. I think that what I heard during the when schools were shut down was there was a lot of emphasis on when we come back, the social emotional mental health supports are going to be so critically important. And yet I don't know that those lasted much longer than the first couple of weeks because we kind of went back to business as usual. And so I'm going to be listening for what does it really look like and feel like every day? Are we using our resources to actually help allocate new dollars or additional dollars through ESSER to round that out so that students have access and parents feel like their students are being supported? And I do think that we have some limitations in that we oftentimes are so focused on how many instructional minutes we have to get in that we don't have, we haven't necessarily found the spaces to, I think, support our students better. And so I do think the social emotional part, like the 11-year-old that you mentioned, who's having real anxiety, like that student not only needs support during the day, but also we need to have programming and support staff who that student can also connect to. I see you, Arden.
Thanks. Laura, followed by Shepherd.
I'd like to just acknowledge that we are all still going through what is a collective trauma. And so when we think about having our students be ready to learn, it's really hard to be ready to learn if socially and emotionally we're not in a place to be able to take in information. And so I believe it's incredibly important that we look to providing for students basic needs for in an environment where they can feel safe and comfortable and ready to learn. That nothing's going to happen unless they're feeling safe, comfortable, and ready to learn. And so for me, that does mean the same thing. It means bringing in collaborations with community partners so that we can ensure that the mental health needs of our students are being met. The school district doesn't have to be responsible for all of that. There certainly should be collaborations taking place, but the teachers can't move forward if students aren't feeling like they are in a place to learn, or if they're simply not in a place to learn. That's where we're seeing these behavior issues popping up. And so I'd like to see every student have an adult that's a safe adult that they can go to within the school. I think that's incredibly important. I would love to see us looking at smaller class sizes right now as a way specifically to address the impact of the pandemic on our students. They do need more attention and smaller spaces right now to get back into the swing of what school could look like. And so I think that those are two important things we could be doing. Along with that, focusing on restorative justice. Our students need to learn and to relearn social skills. That's critical right now, that we look at what they're telling us with their behavior and with their words, and we help address those things.
In Shepherd.
Yeah, so first of all, I do think it is really important to acknowledge that this is an ongoing trauma that we are all being subjected to, and that because it is an ongoing trauma that we are all being subjected to, we know that trauma physically changes the brain's chemistry and changes the way that decision making happens, the way that survival happens, and especially the way that learning happens. And I think that the best way that we can address that is through dedicated mental health first aid for students, whether that be training or individuals. I also do believe in supporting restorative and transformative justice practices, as well as ensuring that the students' basic social and emotional needs are being met so that they can get to a place where they can learn. And I think that at the very end of the day, if it comes down to us needing to adjust our expectations for these students, we need to be keeping in mind that we are responsible for ensuring that they develop into whole, healthy, intelligent human beings. And if that takes a little bit longer right now, then it can take a little bit longer right now.
Thank you, Anna. Okay, part 2 is also a 2-minute question. What can MMSD do now to reduce the dramatic escalation in behavioral problems being reported by staff? And we'll start with Shepherd, followed by Laura.
So I do want to reaffirm my belief in transformative and restorative justice practices. I also do believe in trauma-informed teaching and compassionate teaching, as well as arts integration, and again, ensuring that our students' social and emotional needs are being met. We know that healthy, hurt people, as the saying goes. And so I think that if we're focusing on trying to achieve healthy behavior from these students, then we need to model it by engaging in healthy best practices to address them.
Thank you. Laura, followed by David.
I would like us to look at the implementation of the behavior education plan. So I've also, like David, read through the behavior education plan, as most of us probably have, and I think it's really quite well thought out. And so I'm wondering and I don't know the answers to this yet, but what is happening between the way that it's planned and the way that it's implemented, where teachers, anecdotally, I hear, do not feel like they have enough supports in the classroom. And so there's some disconnect there, and that's what I would like to dig into more. And it's a little hard to do that from the perspective of a parent. And so I think as a board member, I'll have more information to go on to figure out if the plan is not resourced properly, or if we haven't hired enough support staff in the classroom to be in the classrooms or in the schools to be able to help support teachers. But those are things that I want to look at. I absolutely agree that with the plan as it's written, that the first goal is to try to keep students in the classroom, that's incredibly important for all students. But I also believe that our teachers need to be able to focus on teaching. And so striking that balance is critically important. And so if there are chronic behavior issues happening in classrooms and teachers can't focus on teaching the majority of the students, we need to be looking at what supports can we be bringing into those classrooms, or what supports can we be providing for individual students outside of the classroom or inside, that will help ensure that all of the students in the classroom are able to learn within that space.
David, followed by Ali.
Yeah, David Blaska here again. The behavior education plan is the problem, not the solution. The statistics bear that out. Let's compare the school year 2016-17 to 2019-2020, which is the most recent year available, and it was right before the COVID. These are behavioral disciplinary incidents reported to the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction. The number of endangering behavior disciplinary incidents was 161 in 2016. It became 416 in 2019. Weapon related, 18 in 2016, 43 in 2019. Drugs and alcohol, 16 in 2016, 75 in 2019. The problem is teachers don't understand the behavior education plan. It is too complex. I talked about this 3 years ago. Put teachers back in control of their classroom. Put principals back in control of their schools. I mentioned that on the incident report flow chart, the very first thing it says is report any incident to central office. What can they do in central office? You have taken away control of the classroom from the teacher, and that is where it starts and stops. And the primary example of that is what happened at Whitehorse Middle School a couple of years ago. Jennifer Cheatham, the superintendent, got rid of that Mr. Rob, as he was called very fondly, the positive behavior coach, who did everything by the book, Police investigated, and they found him blameless. But by that point, he'd been forced out of the district. He did resign under pressure. And that sent a shockwaves through the teacher corps. They don't want to risk the end of their career by disciplining a student. And all that Mr. Rob is trying to do is remove that student from the school, from the classroom.
Ali, followed by Nichelle.
I think one of the most significant conversations we can have about safety right now is the conversation about what it means to mitigate long-term the reality of COVID. And so we have to admit that studies have shown and research has shown over and over again that when parents are out of work, when economic strain impacts large segments of the family, that children are more likely to be yelled at home, that they're more likely to be harmed at home, that they're more likely to be left alone at home. So many of our students are really recovering from what COVID meant for them. And it took significant chunks of time out of a lot of our young people's education. In 2010, on October 18th, a student was sexually assaulted at East High School in the hallway. This is at a time when the police were working in the building, and the school district at the time and the school at the time had a response. The response was to lock that stairwell and put an alarm on it. That stairwell remains locked to this day. And the other response they had was to hire a sixth security guard. You all are looking at that sixth security guard. If you're not able to have a conversation about sexual violence, about believing young women when they say that they are harmed, you can't be working in our district right now because this is too important of a conversation. Our young people deserve real solutions. They deserve, consent and information and to be empowered. Our educators deserve to be listened to and heard and brought to the table. But we have to also talk about the best practices that really produce safe results. The safest neighborhoods in America are not the ones with the most police. The safest neighborhoods in America are the ones with the most opportunities. Our schools need to be places that provide robust opportunities to our young people. And that means being thoughtful about our curriculum. It means being thoughtful about our kids' ability to be actively engaged in the classroom. It means improving the food and nutrition that we provide our students with.
Thank you. And Nichelle.
Yeah, this is a tough one, talking about the dramatic escalation of behavior. So let me say that I do believe that the behavior education plan, although it intends to be progressive in terms of a developmental discipline response that has more consequences that will keep kids ultimately in the classroom, I do think in its implementation, there have been some real challenges. And some of that could be due to not having enough support staff, or maybe we had enough support staff, but that the levels haven't quite captured what has been happening. So for me, even pre-COVID, I feel like there used to be pretty regular updates about the behavior education plan and its implementation. We haven't, or I haven't heard as much about that lately. So I think it's worth going back to the table and really looking at how is that plan overall working. I also think though we've had some history in our district of like escalated, disturbing, challenging behavior isn't necessarily new. It seems exacerbated right now because of the pandemic. But I remember even a few years ago at La Follette, this is when Jen Cheatham was here. There were a group of young folks that were at the point kind of turning the school into a little bit of a crisis, and folks didn't know what to do. And I was part of some staff that actually worked with that group of young folks offsite in what we called a micro school. It was much smaller. It was much more intimate. We did do restorative justice circles. We brought in a teacher. And I know that we can't replicate that in every setting, but I do think that we have tried some things in the past that have given us some evidence that we can find some solutions to this. It just takes kind of resourcing and allocating the way that we're doing our work differently. Sorry.
Thank you. I just want to remind the viewing audience that in chat is contact information for each of the candidates. So if you come up with follow-up questions or additional questions, please feel free to reach out to them individually. So the next question is 1 minute response. Learning loss is a major concern for everyone, parents, staff, and the community. How will the district determine which students need academic intervention? And we'll start off with Nichelle, followed by Laura.
You must have seen my face, Arlene, when I was like, ooh, okay. So here's the thing in my mind about how interventions work. In some ways, you have to do some kind of an assessment. You have to have some kind of baseline, some understanding of where a student is in order to better understand the interventions and supports they might need. So one, I do think that we have to know something about how our students came back and how they are progressing currently to know. But I say that with a little bit of a caution, because I also feel like there has been this this urgency around learning loss that then heightens the need for almost like over-assessment, which I also don't think is getting us where we need to go. And I don't know that it's actually helping students, especially the students who may need more support. So I think for me, I would want to be listening to our administrators about what is the balance of knowing where students are and what's the overall assessment strategy so that we can help our students.
Laura, followed by Shepherd.
I would look at this as less of a district conversation and more of a conversation that happens within classrooms. I would like to see teachers looking at their curriculum over the next couple years in a way that it is scaffolded, or it is made from less to more complex, so that students, wherever they are able to find a place where they can dig into the curriculum and then grow from there. That's a concept in early childhood education that we automatically do with all children and with all classrooms, is the concept of scaffolding a curriculum. And because most of our students have lost quite a bit of opportunities for learning over the last year and a half or 2 years, I think it's fair to expect that that's going to be necessary across the board, actually, to do that. And so I just like to defer to the wisdom of our teachers to be using curriculum in that way.
Shepherd, followed by Ali.
So I think that scaffolding is a fantastic idea. I also think that if we are going to be turning our focus towards identifying which students in particular may need more more intensive support academically and more intensive intervention academically, I think that we need to be acutely aware of other factors which are also impacting their education, things like their racial identity, their socioeconomic status, as well as whether or not they're living with any sort of disability. Speaking from my experience as someone who was undiagnosed with a learning disability very late in life, because I received no intervention in school for the learning loss that I was undergoing. I think that if we need to be following the classroom teachers and the administrators' leads on their suggestions, keeping in mind evidence-based best practices, and ensuring that we're always making sure that we're protecting the most marginalized members of our communities.
Thank you. Ali, followed by David.
Yeah, I think this is such an important question. And I really do think like we have to be considerate of the self-esteem of our young people right now and how we describe the experience that they just went through. And we have to recognize that our students did lose time in terms of their ability to engage with school in person. However, our students took initiative and did tremendous things online. And there's a real gap in our ability to give students academic credit for the skills that they gained online. So if my 7-year-old can use, Zoom better than my mother, I think that she deserves a certain amount of recognition for those skills, because here we all are, adults using this technology, and our kids have been refining their skills and their ability to engage with this technology for the last couple of years. We need to strengthen our approach and our investment in special education. And we need to really recognize how it strengthens kids to see one another learning at a different place. So embracing things like mixed age classrooms is something I'm incredibly passionate about.
Thank you. And David.
Yeah, David Blaska here again. I wish we'd stop blaming COVID. The fact of the matter is, now let's talk about the Department of Public Instruction report cards. The number of students who performed below grade in English was 30.2% in 2017-18. That increased to 31.7% in 2020-21. In mathematics, 2017-18, 33.2% were below basic performance. That increased from 33.2% to 38.0% in 2020. Again, I blame the behavior education plan. I was sorry to hear someone mention racial identity. That has no place in school. That is no place. We can't teach victimhood and then expect people to be agents of their own improvement. I heard a term called truant in school. We've got kids in the hallways and in the cafeterias. We need to have high expectations for all kids.
Thank you all. And the last question under the COVID learning loss headline is 2 minutes to answer. And if you could be specific, please, what actions should the Board of Education take to make students with academic deficits a priority? And we will start off with David, followed by Ali.
Well, again, just to continue, I've encouraged people to read a book called Woke Racism by John McWhorter. He writes for the New York Times. He's the professor at Columbia University, and he's actually took Rebecca Blank to task at the University of Wisconsin for removing a stone because someone used a racist term many years ago. We've gone away from, I think, from academics, rigorous requirements, expectations, and our teachers are good teachers, and they will put in the extra effort to help a student, but that student has to put in the extra effort as well. And I think it behooves all of us who think of ourselves as leaders in the community to say, kids, quit making excuses, quit playing the blame game, quit playing victim, and it's your future. We have the cure for poverty. It's in our school system. It's called education. We need to get that message out. We need to say that. We need to use the bully pulpit to say, kids, you can be anything you want to be. But we have kids now who are coming out of school, they're functionally illiterate. And this preceded COVID. Let's not use COVID again as an excuse. Discipline is not hitting kids with a hickory stick. It is stick-to-itiveness. It is finishing an assignment. It is listening to the teacher. It is following the rules. And that is how, because mathematics has rules, the English language has rules. That is a key to success, and you won't get a job if you don't show up on time every day, ready to learn, ready to perform. The mayor should be spelling that out. Superintendent Jenkins should be saying that. Ali Muldrow should be saying that, but we don't hear that. Blaska says that. That's why I'm asking for your vote. I'm a write-in, by the way.
If I did not indicate, this is a 2-minute question. So we'll go to Ali, followed by Nichelle.
Thank you so much for giving us kind of the additional time to really talk about the role of the board and the steps that the board can do to address the current reality created by this global pandemic in terms of our students learning and the reality of our schools. So the board has three fundamental components in terms of what we do. We pass policy, we pass the budget, meaning we have a say in every dollar spent, including the ESSER funding that we are getting, from the federal government, which is one-time funding that increases our budget by 8% for 1 year. So how we invest those resources into strengthening education right now means really looking at what our teachers are advocating for in terms of mental health support. It means buying new curriculum and investing in the science of reading and early literacy so that we are really pushing for our young people to be on track. It means, creating a retention plan and a human resources plan with our superintendent and evaluating those plans and producing data and transparency around what we're doing to attract staff to this district and retain staff. I've heard folks call this the great resignation movement, but this is also a moment to attract people to this profession and to this district and really provide people the opportunity to be part of a successful community, successful schools, and to promote the success of their students. I have 3 children who will go to this district. I'm invested in the long haul. And so the board right now needs the continuity to understand how the pandemic continues to affect our students. We continue to need to have our students masking as a way to make sure that our students who are the most medically fragile still get to be part of school, still get to go in person, still get to be part of recess, right? So we need to continue to invest in the mitigation strategies related to COVID. We need to strengthen our supports for mental health, and we need to empower our educators and listen to what they're saying in terms of how we get our schools back on track.
Thank you. Nichelle, followed by Shepherd.
Thank you so much. So let me just start by saying I appreciate this question, and yet I also have a little bit of a challenge with the language of describing children with academic deficits. And this is coming from a place as a mom of 4 sons who, based on state assessments throughout their career in MMSD, would have been seen as the academic deficient. And I can tell you as a former parent, I internalized that in many ways. I thought that I didn't do enough. I was spread too thin. I didn't encourage their learning enough. And yet I was doing everything that I possibly knew how to do. And there was nothing more damaging than hearing your own children take the MAP test and get an automatic result and say to themselves, I'm dumb. Okay, I experienced that. So I feel like as a school board member, the first thing is I want to be able to use language that exudes confidence, a high expectation that every single one of our students can learn. And that as a school district, we owe it to you. We want the confidence of every family who is sending their student to us that we're going to get it right for you. I do believe as a school board member that we have to get after strong reading. It is like foundational. There are too many of our young people matriculating out of elementary into the secondary grades without that core foundation. So that is key. I also would love to see more investments in family engagement because I feel like families are partners in an academic relationship. And I also want to make sure that we are using resources that will help every student, every family that is struggling in our district feel like they can access support and move on in a positive trajectory through our district. Thank you.
Shepherd, followed by Laura.
So I think first and foremost, we need to be following the lead of school staff and administrators when they make recommendations for what we can be doing to better support our scholars. And I think in extension of that, we need to be investing in evidence-based best practices, especially early childhood education and literacy. We know that literacy is something that affects every single aspect of every single person's life. And we know that without literacy, there is little to no foundation for the future of their education. So I think that that's going to be one of our number one priorities. That will be my number one priority, one of my number one priorities. I also do believe in investing in mental health first aid and trauma-informed teaching, especially during these times when we're talking about addressing academic deficits or learning loss, especially due to a moment of intense trauma. We have to be addressing that trauma so that the students can move through it and get back to a place of learning.
Thank you. And Laura?
Well, I'm always happy to hear that there's money to spend. And so I'm going to approach it from that angle. So knowing that we're in a place right now where we do have students who could be doing more academically, what I would like to see us looking at is creating a more robust after school program along with summer programs that would help provide for students to have some continuity of learning later in the day and then during the summertime, particularly geared towards students that would benefit from that. I also think when we look at our model of what schools look like and what classrooms look like, we could be adjusting those models. If it's temporary money, then it's a temporary adjustment. But this is a time when we could be talking about bringing in more school staff, more teachers and more aides to lower class sizes or work in small groups with students, because we know that that is effective. We also know that students who feel comfortable and welcomed in schools are going to be more likely to be able to be invested in learning. And so making sure that we have enough adults, that students are forming strong relationships with adults and feeling like they are an important part of the school community is incredibly important when you look at long-term academic achievement. I also would like to just give a shout out for early childhood education. That's my thing, and that's where everything starts. And so any type of investment we can make in early childhood education is going to have both short and very long-lasting benefits.
Thank you. The next section, which some of you have touched on in your answers, focuses on staff retention. So teacher and staff shortages and burnout are being reported on a national level. In early February, an article in the Isthmus reported that MMSD is facing many challenges in staffing. Fears of catching COVID, constantly subbing for colleagues, enforcing pandemic protocols, behavioral issues, legislative requirements about what and how to teach, and lack of respect from some in the community is a partial list of what is contributing to low staff morale and people leaving the district. As Isthmus described it, a perfect storm. Many teachers and staff members feel ignored and not supported. This is coupled with a decrease in people choosing to enter the education profession. A perfect storm indeed. So please answer with specifics. This is a 2-minute question. There are reports from staff members that there is a lack of support coming from human resources. Also, teachers are reporting that exit interviews are not being held. So specifically, how would you use staff voice to inform needed changes to address teacher retention? And we'll start with Laura, followed by Shepherd.
Thank you for this question. I believe that it is incredibly important that staff voice be heard in all decisions made throughout the district. We work really hard to hire teachers who study for years and come in with tremendous skills and experience. And then there's all these top-down requirements on them, which don't allow them to use their unique skills and necessarily to follow their passions in the classroom. And so what I would like to do is to make sure that as decisions are being made that are going to impact the classroom, that we are thinking about, number one, is it necessary to create a directive for staff? And if it is, we need to have staff at the table. We need to have teachers at the table to be talking about what the actual impact will be of whatever rule is coming down. Right now, I think that the strongest thing we can be doing for staff retention is to be giving our staff more autonomy, to be giving them back control in their classrooms to teach in the way that they have learned to teach, in a way that inspires them, which will then inspire their students to learn and will encourage them, to stay, because they'll have a place. They'll be able to be individuals within their classroom. One of the things that I hear from teachers is that they didn't get into teaching to be doing what they're doing right now. And so I would love to give them back the power to teach so that our students can learn as best that they can from these wonderful teachers that we've hired.
Shepherd, followed by Ali.
So I think first and foremost, one of the biggest things that we can be doing is trusting and empowering school staff to do what they do best and to trust that they know how to do it best. And beyond that, looking at specific things we can be providing them, as many more resources as we possibly can, especially looking at some of the short-term funding that we're going to have. We can use this as an opportunity to, at the very least, provide them a little bit of a boon with resources, at least for a short time, to show them that yes, we do value you, and yes, we are listening, and this is what we can do right now. A good faith effort goes a very long way, especially in trying times. I also think that, we can be listening and dedicating explicit time to listening to staff and to listening to the feedback of classroom teachers. It's one thing to say, I've always got an ear. It's another thing to say, everybody stop, they're talking. And I think that we can allocate more time and resources to following through on some of the promises that we do make and some of the agreements that we've entered into to ensure that those are being followed out loud and not just being followed on a technicality, as well as investing in teacher recruitment, investing in mentorship and induction programs, if possible, to ensure that there's really strong relationships between the teachers that are coming in, the school staff that's coming in, especially now, and the school staff that's still around.
Ali, followed by David.
Thank you so much for this question. I think it's really important that people understand the long-term impact of our current structure when it comes to how we finance education in the state of Wisconsin. And so we've been talking about educator shortages since Act 10. Right now, we passed 2 historic referendums, and our authority to access those resources and levy that tax on the community is being eaten into by a series of exemptions that we've gotten due to the fact that we are seeing lower enrollment. 2019 was the lowest birth rate year in the United States of America since 1987. So this trend of having lower enrollment isn't changing. However, if we want to embrace a shift in education that supports early learners to a greater extent, full day 4K allows for us to really expand who has access to our district, and also, create a space for us to be hiring educators in to support our students and prepare them for school in the long run. I think retention is in part about growing our own educators and really giving our teachers voice and a seat at the table. Me and Maya Pearson recently wrote an article for the Wisconsin State Journal that said, the pandemic really has proven that we need collective bargaining. Teachers care about a lot more than their wage, and we need the unified voice of labor at the table talking to us about the conditions in the classroom at this point in time. So we need, to really rely on our union and our partnership with educators to have a unified voice in terms of the support our teachers are advocating for and how to invest in our classrooms effectively. I think the other thing I really want to highlight in this time is that we need to invest in a diverse staff. And so when we talk about retention, we can't just be talking about what it means to retain the people that are already here. We also have to acknowledge what it means to retain the people who are joining our district and what it means to set up our newest leaders and our newest educators for success in this district. And that means looking at our entire package. That means examining our healthcare. That means looking at how we provide sick time. It means a lot. So thank you.
Thank you. David, followed by Nichelle.
Yeah, David Blaska here again. Well, Ali, I would just say, and any of you who have visited classrooms to the extent that you say you have, I think you probably know what's going on in the classrooms. And things that I'm hearing are the teachers don't feel like they're in control of their classrooms. And this is a principle that I enunciated 3 years ago, is put teachers back in control of their classrooms. Maybe I did grow up in the dark ages, but the fact of the matter is, you knew that certain teachers did not put up with any guff, and you paid attention and you stood up straight and you answered and you studied. Otherwise, you would be upbraided by the teacher. They controlled their classroom, and I heard this under Jennifer Cheatham especially, and she's only been gone now for a year. There's all top down. This has nothing to do with Act 10. This has nothing to do with teachers' unions. It has to do with a person who apparently received the wisdom and knows better And of course, she was rewarded with a professorship at Harvard. So she's creating more Jennifer Cheathams. We're getting that, I think, from from administrators. They're trained to by a certain set of principles that they imposed on everyone else, and that is the behavior education plan. It is too complex. It is in every teacher, I think, fears that they'll run afoul of that and turn into another Mr. Rob, who actually had to change his appearance so he wouldn't be harassed. The fact is that our school resource police officers were expelled from school, not due to any policy considerations, but due to intimidation and harassment. They F-bombed the personal home of Gloria Reyes, then the school board president, who in the presence of her children. And so she changed her vote. And that's how policy gets made in our school district, when it's unfortunate. And the teachers and the students are the ones who suffer.
Thank you. And Nichelle.
All right, coming back to staff retention. This is something I feel so deeply about, because we all know, as you kind of stated in the opening, Arlene, there are all kinds of reports from staff about the challenges they're facing, the exhaustion from subbing, losing preps, dealing with more escalated kind of student needs, and not really knowing where there is an end where there's a light at the end of the tunnel. So for me, I guess as a board member, the first thing that I want to be able to focus on is asking our current administration, what exactly is the plan for staff retention? I've not yet heard kind of a more comprehensive HR approach. And I know that we can't necessarily make educators just, drop out of the sky and be ready to hire. But I do think it is really important that we are spending energy on retaining staff that we have now. We need to do that by listening to them, asking them what they think they need in order to stay here. And I also think, compensation is a part of a retention strategy, but I also think employees want to feel respected and valued. And to the extent that we as a district aren't doing that well, that is an area that needs critical focus and improvement. I also think that we can focus on retention by honoring the fact that we do have a handbook committee, and staff voice is a critical part of the handbook committee. And so we should want to ensure at the board level that the handbook committee is actually functioning, meeting, and that we have evidence that staff are giving shape and voice into many of the conditions around their employment. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. So I know we're a couple of minutes over time, but if you don't mind, we have one more question and then a quick yes/no question. Is that okay? So the final question is on safety, and it's a 2-minute question. Recently, there have been a number of situations such as large fights, loaded guns, assault on another student, especially at the high schools, that have caused a great deal of concern among parents and in the community. They are worried about safety in the schools. What changes and/or resources will you as a board member propose to help reduce the level of conflict in the schools and increase the confidence with parents in the community? We'll start with Ali, followed by David. 2 minutes.
Thank you so much for this question. I first want to say that I think, the fear our parents have had around our schools is something I deeply understand and have been impacted by. I think one of the scariest moments in my entire 3 years on the school board, and this first term has really been shaped by some pretty intense moments. I was there when we closed schools on March 13th. I was part of the board when a student brought a loaded gun to school at La Follette. But I did get a phone call one day, at 10 o'clock in the morning, where somebody said 11 ambulances are headed to East High School. And immediately I was concerned that somebody had brought a weapon into that school and that our children and our educators' lives were at stake. And I love the people at East High School. You know, my teachers, the people I grew up with still work there. Those are the people who taught me to think for myself. And so I think addressing safety in our schools really means providing effective support to our students and to our educators, equipping our students with conflict resolution skills, giving our young people, and we saw so much outpouring of love from our community in the face of those dynamics. We saw, you know, moms on a mission show up and immediately decrease behavior incidents at lunch. We saw folks donating their time and resources to our schools to support our staff. We saw a tremendous amount of love, you know, an outpouring of support for our schools. And what I think we can do is leverage that to really strengthen our staffing, to really bring in additional support and assistance to our students, and also equip our kids with skills throughout their education. Conflict is a normal part of life. And so if we give our kids and instill our kids early on with a sense that they can resolve conflict proactively and non-violently, that they can have a difference of opinion and still engage with one another in healthy ways, we can not only make our schools safer, we can make our communities safer.
Thank you. David, followed by Nichelle.
Hi, David Blaska here again. Well, you know, conflict resolution, that has to be taught, and we're not teaching that. We are not teaching that. The fact of the matter is that behavior intimidation has worked. So what would I do? I would, first of all, return school resource police officers to the 4 high schools, and I'd also deploy some to the middle schools. These were wonderful role models, people of color, minorities, who showed folks that the police can be their best friends. And we've seen too many victims, too many beating victims of all races in the years since the police have been removed. Who is the victims of removing the police officers and of discipline itself? It's kids of color, by and large. I would abolish Jennifer Cheatham's dysfunctional behavior education program. I would put teachers back in control of their classroom, principals back in charge of their schools. I would boil down the 111-page district safety plan to its essentials, beginning with the very first step. Instead of calling central office and the Doyle Administration Building, call 911 first and then contact the parents. I would keep the schools open. I would reduce central administration staff. And I would teach discipline. And that is simply showing up for school on time with high expectations. This is going to help kids who need the help the most. And I don't think anyone can say that our schools are safer now than they were 3 years ago. Even Jennifer Cheatham admitted that 6 years ago, she said, we made a major shift. We took a step into uncharted territory. A zero policy toward discipline was having a disproportionate and negative effect on some students. Well, it has had a disproportionate effect on some students, but the fact of the matter is, those students are also victims of beatings. And we're now seeing adults come into the schools and join in with their children to engage in some of the, I would call them, riots that we've had. No one can say that our schools are safer, and we're seeing the spill out on our streets, especially with stolen cars and shootings. We had a whacking outside of West High School last summer. So that's a problem.
Nichelle, followed by Laura.
Thank you. First, I just want to acknowledge that being either a victim of an act of violence or being a witness to an act of violence is traumatizing. And it's a legit reason for our students and some of our families to be concerned. I do think that we need to go back to better identifying how acts of violence of any kind are dealt with in a way that that the school climate and the staff and the students in the building feel like they are safe. And let me just say that I also feel like one of the main things that we heard about SROs was that they were phenomenal at building relationships with students. I guess where I stand is I don't believe that we need SROs back in the schools. What I do think is we need trusted adults who have a sense of authority and relationships with students, who can intervene, who can de-escalate, who may know what's happening outside of the school on a weekend on social media, and then help intervene and mitigate that before things blow up. I don't know that we are resourced adequately to do that, quite honestly. And so I think that is something that we should reevaluate. And I do think that, you know, our high schools in particular do have, you know, deans of students, safety and security. We now have a one RJ position. I'm not sure how all of those positions are working together or if they're even enough. But I do think that, yeah, the safety, you know, acts of violence and those things that feel really scary are things that we want to deal with. And so I want to be able to, as a board member, look at how we are resourcing those kinds of investments.
Thank you. And Laura, followed by Shepherd.
So I'm going to answer this question both as a parent of a senior at East High School and also as a potential board member. As a parent who works from home, I could hear those ambulances going to the school. And I have to say, there is nothing more terrifying than knowing that your child is where those ambulances are going. And so I think it is incredibly important for us right now at this moment to distinguish between philosophically, what do we want our school to look like? And how do we want to get there? And what is happening right now? And how can we make sure that right now our students are safe? And so I need to separate those things out. That's critical for me. In the long term, I don't want to have police at our schools. I know that within the first 2 months of school this year at East, the police were called 63 times. That is wholly unacceptable. That is absolutely frightening as a parent. We need to do something now about that. In the long term, I want us to have a school that is robust with trusted adults that are able to have strong relationships with our students, anticipate that their needs, do crisis intervention in a way that is safe and respectful to our students. At this moment in time, I want to know that when I send my son to school, he's going to come home safely. And so what that means is that at this moment, when we don't have enough staff in our schools, I'd bring the SROs back. I'm at a point in time where I would bring metal detectors into our schools. And I recognize that none of that is good and none of that's ideal. But I want to know that my son and his friends are all going to come home safely every day.
Thank you. And we'll wrap it up with Shepherd.
Yeah, so school safety is obviously vitally important. It's the foundation of being in school, is feeling safe in school. Students can't learn if they don't feel safe. And I know from my experience, I graduated high school in 2014. And I vividly recall having active shooter not drills and how that felt being in a classroom, wondering if I was going to make it home to my parents. With that being said, I think that the most important thing that we can do is something at all. I think that we have to be making decisions and we have to be making clear, decisive action plans and following through with them. It is a huge, complex issue, and it warrants a lot of attention and a lot of careful thought, and it also warrants clear action and decisive follow through. I believe in restorative justice. I believe in transformative justice. I believe in the science that tells us that intimidation does not modify behavior. It breeds compliance, and compliance is not how students learn. Compliance is how students shut up. And I believe that if we are primarily focused on creating healthy, intelligent individuals, then we need to honor that, and we need to acknowledge that we cannot simply intimidate them into compliance.
Thank you. In one yes or no answer question, but just yes or no, please. It's on cell phones. So we hear reports that the use of cell phones in the classroom is out of control. Many students ignore teachers' directions around phones. They play games, watch movies, and text friends, which interferes with their learning and also frustrates staff. Will you work to reduce the unlimited access that students currently have to their cell phones in the classroom? Yes or no? Laura, followed by Shepherd.
Yes.
Shepherd, followed by Ali.
Yes.
Ali, followed by David.
Absolutely.
David, followed by Nichelle.
Yes.
Nichelle?
Yes, seems like we're all on the yes plan.
Okay, all on the yes plan. Well, that wraps up our forum. I want to say thank you again to Eastside Progressives and GRUMPS for hosting the forum. Thank you to all who work behind the scenes to make this a success. It's much appreciated. And finally, a big thank you to the candidates for your time tonight and commitment to the school district. Remember to vote April 5th. This arguably is one of the most important elected positions in the district. So please
Arlene,
get out and vote. It is Shepherd Joyner and Laura Simkin running for seat 3. Ali Muldrow and David Blaska running for seat 4, and Nichelle Nichols running unopposed for seat 5. So again, thank you for your time. The link to this video will be posted on the Eastside Progressives Facebook page by sometime tomorrow at the latest. So please share and contact the candidates if you have further questions. Again, thanks everyone. Marvelous job.
Arlene, thank you so much.
Thank you. Nice to see you all.
It's so nice to see you.